Captain America Brave New World outflies box office projections. Clayface courts a couple of directors. And Matt Damon is Nolan's Odysseus. All that and more coming up right after this. Welcome to Multiverse News, your source for information about all your favorite fictional universes. My name's Matthew Carroll, and with me today we got J. Scotty St. Clair. What's happening, buddy?
Hey, feeling brave, ready to take on the world. Let's do this.
Yeah, get them wings ready. Haley Hobbs, how's it going, my friend?
Oh, I'm coming to you from the frozen land of Kier here in Kansas, where it's negative 18 degrees.
I think joining you in the frozen lands is Jay Sisson. How's it going, Jay?
Hey, it's on its way. It's not here yet, but it's expected to start snowing here very soon. So thanks for passing it on.
You're welcome. We'll go frolic in an Ortbo together.
Oh, that's wonderful. How wholesome.
As long as it's not calamitous.
I was going to say, it seems a little terrifying more than wholesome.
Man, I'm just realizing how this show, is listened to by a lot of people who don't necessarily watch Severance, and how bonkers all of that must have sounded to people who are not paying attention. We're frolicking in an Ortbo.
My innie showed up today for Multiverse News.
Nice. And we have a 5-star review, as always, this week from Eric Teskey, saying, thanks for keeping up on all the news so I don't have to, giving wonderful summaries and substance behind the headlines. I found out about you guys from listening to Across the Bifrost, the Mighty Thor podcast. Appreciate all you do. Cheers. Well, cheers to you.
Right. Sorry, Eric, if you don't listen to or watch Severance.
Yeah, if you don't watch Severance, then that made no sense.
We hijacked your review to make it about
It wasn't
Severance.
us, it was Lumen.
Yeah, Lumen hijacked you. It was the Glasgow block. What's the protocol in season 1?
The overtime contingency.
Overtime contingency. Thank you. Yeah, you guys got to be watching Severance. Like we're over here just talking in Severance language at this point.
It's morphing into a Severance cast every week.
Yeah,
just
more and more.
It's Lumen's grand plan.
We've got reintegration happening between these casts.
To bring it back to something Eric might actually recognize, I will say this is a worthy review. Well done.
Mm.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, check out Across the Bifrost. We've had Ryan Doze on as a guest before, and Eric co-hosts the show with him.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
cool.
As I always complain about Ryan Doze, he's the reason the show is like an hour and a half every week. It's his fault. We were a 30-minute show, and then Ryan Doze ruined everything.
Or he revealed our true nature.
Yeah. He leveled us up to our true potential, but I just think it's funny to have like a beef with him.
A pretend beef.
Yeah, pretend beef for sure.
Like a one-sided beef. A side of beef. Okay, let's move on.
What do you call a cow with no legs?
Ground beef.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I know that one. Very good.
You got kids. Are you hanging?
You come for beef humor or not, people? Because you're getting it whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Little housekeeping note. Multiverse News is going to have a little weird schedule coming up because Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast is going to be covering Daredevil Born Again, which is going to be dropping on Tuesday nights, which is our normal record time. We'll be doing our instant reactions to that. And also, the time we normally record will be exactly when Daredevil Born Again drops. So that doesn't seem like a good time to record. So we might be shifting our record times. We also might be having some episodes be audio only because I'm going to have a lot on my plate those weeks. So the wonderful J. Scotty St. Clair has volunteered to do some edits, but that means less video. So bear with us as we navigate that. It'll be a little week to week as we try to figure out those 9 weeks of Daredevil. 8 or 9 weeks, we're not sure yet.
I'm going to call this what it is. It's a personal attack from Kevin Feige on our podcast.
Yeah, he gave us a Fantastic Four teaser, and we were like, oh my God, thank you. And then he was like, screw you guys.
Yeah.
He's like, when do they record again? Move it up.
They've been calling me out by name.
We already know it's got a second season, so if the viewership numbers aren't exactly there and it sways them away from doing Tuesday night drops again, wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for us here.
Yeah,
that's pie
true,
in the sky thinking, Scotty.
We are that powerful.
That's right. We move worlds. That's right.
You wait till Wednesday and you'll like it. Sorry.
All right. Well, Captain America Brave New World premiered globally last week, soaring to the top of the Valentine's Day and President's Day weekend box office with a $192.4 million haul in tow. The Anthony Mackie-led vehicle, which is the 4th Captain America film and the 35th MCU film overall, managed to exceed somewhat meager box office projections. However, its reception with both critics and audiences isn't as definitive a victory. The film is currently sitting at 51% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, that's the critic score, and has earned a B- CinemaScore, which is among some franchise lows for Marvel. This film and its long, drawn-out production have been the source of many conversations for us here, but what do we think now that we have taken our first breaths in this brave new world Marvel has concocted?
Yeah, cards on the table. I have not seen Brave New World yet.
Fake fan.
Hey. Had a busy weekend. The road to my theater was literally flooded for a day. And,
so many excuses.
Just haven't been there yet. But I am not going to, talk about what I thought about the movie because I haven't seen it yet. But I can talk about the numbers that came in for the movie. And I think, they turned out sort of what we expected, right? This was the projections in the weeks leading up that it would do somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million worldwide, and it hit about 192. So, it's kind of what you expect. It's definitely not the lowest opening for an MCU movie by any stretch of the imagination. It is in the bottom half, but it's not at lowest when you compare to other ones. I think when you look at this one, if you're thinking about the future of the box office for it, there's a couple different things you got to think about. Like, I think you kind of have to look back to Quantumania. Quantumania opened over President's Day weekend, same time, opened to about $20 or so million more worldwide, so had a little bit stronger opening than Captain America. And then that movie ended up kind of falling off. And its second weekend, it dropped by 70%, and it ended up pulling up, I think, somewhere around 476 million worldwide, which, that's whenever we start labeling an MCU movie with the F word, flop, right? We start saying, like, well, it didn't make back its budget or whatever, and it was a failure, and now the character may or may not appear in the future, and we start talking about that. And so I think if you're looking at Captain America, and you're Disney, you really like it to end somewhere with a 6 in front of its worldwide number, or even a 7. I don't know if it can get there after this particular jump out the gate. You'd want it to have more of a higher debut, because one of the trends with these MCU movies is they have been, at least since Endgame, sort of dropping off in their second weekends. I looked it up before we started. Thor: Love and Thunder dropped 67%. So did Multiverse of Madness. Ant-Man dropped 70%, and the Marvels dropped 78%. So it has been a problem a little bit for Marvel movies. But I think if we're looking at it and we're looking at that B- CinemaScore, that is the lowest CinemaScore for an MCU movie ever. And that, if you're just looking at that and using it as predictive, which what it is, that doesn't bode well for the general box office of the movie, right? And you got to remember, the CinemaScore, it's not indicative of the quality of a movie. That's not what it's for. It's not rating the movie. It's not like a Rotten Tomatoes score. The CinemaScore is a measure of its box office longevity. So it's exit polls and it's data that's collected around a movie, and then they're projecting, all right, well, it's going to have this much staying power in its coming weeks after its opening weekend. So typically franchise movies kind of get an A in their sleep. So to get a B-, what that tells you is that at least the industry is expecting that this movie will take a pretty steep drop in its following weekends. So I think all that being said, if you're looking for reasons to be positive, you liked the movie, you like the MCU, you're like, tell me a reason to be happy about the movie. Well, if you liked it, then I think you should be happy. But looking at the box office in general, it's got an 80% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. I know you said the 51%, that's the critic score. The audience score is 80, so that tells you that people are going and saying that they like it online. Demographically, it was pretty diverse in terms of ticket sales, so that's good. It appeals to a lot of different people. And then I think if you want to look at a model and be like, it should be like this, or hopefully it's like this, you want to look at something like Mufasa. Mufasa opened to like 120 million worldwide or something. Did not have a great opening, but it steadily grew, and now it's still in theaters. It's sniffing 700 million worldwide. It just had this slow growth over weeks and weeks and weeks. So can Captain America do that? I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I think when you're looking at these numbers, you got all this discourse online. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a flop? Is it solid? I don't think it's either of those. I think it's just somewhere in the middle. It's kind of average for an MCU movie. It's a little bit on the lower end, but it has potential to grow over the weeks if word of mouth is strong on it.
I think you bury the lead a little bit where we don't say that this is the second highest opening for a Captain America movie, and the first was Civil War. And I think that's notable because this is a solo-led movie. In theory, yes, it's an ensemble cast, but I think for all of the things that have been talked about this movie, that's a really important thing to point out. And if the drop-off happens, the drop-off happens, but it seems like generally audiences liked it. And like my theater was pretty full at a primetime showing Friday night. There were tons of people in the lobby. Like they were showing it in so many different theaters. I think that I hope it will have growth or at least steady box office growth because, it deserves it in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like all the discourse around it that's negative, I guess.
One of the things that makes me think of, looking back, one of the things that was I saw this week is it had the highest opening night, or the second highest opening night of any Captain America film, which just is kind of because the MCU changed over time. Like in the early days, I'm looking at like First Avenger was in like the $300 million range, the 300 and something. And it's like, you think about the sort of ebb and flow of the MCU and how it did hit humongous heights for like phase 3. But where it started in phases 1 and 2, it was not always hitting $1 billion. And so I'm wondering if we're in that lull phase. We're still have this franchise that's hitting the numbers it was hitting in the beginning. It still can build momentum. If it just has a couple great movies in a row, it can build that momentum and be back on top and have another experience like an Endgame. It's just, I think it's literally been a rebuilding phase. I think they've taken a little long with that. I think they did a bad job of planning out phases 4 through 6. Even if I've liked all the properties, I think the planning's been poor, and the release schedule. But, there's still a lot of hope when you think about like still making money that it used to make in phases 1 and 2. Like it's not terrible. These aren't terrible numbers for a movie to do. But it does probably mean they're going to have to get the budgets under control if they're going to realize they're in a phase like that. And they need the budgets to match the take they're going to bring in.
Yeah, well, I know you brought up Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier had a pretty low, Haley, you mentioned it had a pretty low box office in the opening weekend, and that is true.
I brought up Civil War, because the comparison is Civil War.
Low isn't the right word. I think I meant like behind what this movie did, But it ended right around north of $700 million worldwide. And so I think like Winter Soldier is a blueprint of kind of what you're talking about, Matt. Like these movies back in the day, at least, they didn't have these like smash box office opening weekends sometimes. Sometimes they had a little bit more muted by today's standards, but then they did grow over time. So Winter Soldier, it popped into the theaters, had an okay box office, but then it had really strong word of mouth. It got really good reviews, and then people started seeing it in its second, third, fourth, fifth weekends. And it really like drove, kind of like Mufasa, like we just said, like it just kind of kept stacking these like solid weekend after solid weekend. So, this one doesn't have the critic score behind it that Winter Soldier had, which I don't know how much that matters at the end of the day. But still, the possibility is there that these movies can have these like not explosion, opening weekends and still like get to the end and you're like, oh, that movie made that? Oh, it's pretty good, or whatever by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah. I've seen the movie twice and I've had some time to mull over it. And I think my take on this movie is the same as it was coming out of the theater. It's a really solid, fun movie. Is it perfect? No. Does it have some obvious flaws? Yes, it does. But I think it's just a solid, entertaining movie, a great vehicle for Anthony Mackie. Some of the action sequences and choreography were really thrilling. So it's interesting, like the whole lead up to this movie, I was the one with hesitation and reservations, and to come out on the other side, I'm with you, Haley. I've kind of found the discourse around this movie to be really deflating. And I'm like trying to check myself because everybody's entitled to their own opinion, sure. But I really feel like I've almost had to like come to the defense of this movie, and it's become a lot more apparent to me, the shifting narrative, and it really does feel like people just kind of have their like teeth out and claws out for this thing. Because Jet, you talked about the projections, and the projections were adjusted. Like in the couple of weeks before, we were talking about like 80 million. So really, when you thought this movie was going to come in at 80 million and it does 100 million, that's actually $20 million better than what people were expecting. And to compare that to, Matt, you made some great points about like phase 1 and phase 2. Like I immediately thought of summer 2015 again with Ant-Man. And if I'm not mistaken, Ant-Man only made like 65, maybe 85 million tops. The first Doctor Strange, very similar. So we were just at a point in the MCU where we were willing to give new characters a chance and give them a chance, pardon the pun here, a chance to spread their wings. And it's just like,
yeah,
I've gotten really just tired of the conversation, just like Marvel's back, Marvel's dead, Marvel's back, Marvel's dead. We just had a $1 billion grossing movie last summer, and people are really excited for Daredevil, for Thunderbolts, for the Fantastic Four. So just take it in stride, give this movie a chance, just kind of like check yourself and maybe, where you're coming from. And yeah, like I said, I don't think everybody that doesn't like this movie is necessarily have, nefarious intentions or anything like that. But I really do feel like this movie, just like for whatever reason, people are gunning for it, and it feels unfairly so.
Well, there's a dogpile effect with this kind of stuff. I mean, if somebody already has a disposition to not like a franchise or not like, for whatever reason, maybe a movie or a show or something in a franchise, and then there's even like the slightest crack of this might be an issue with the movie or this might be a production issue or whatever, then it does sort of open the door for like the airing of the grievances. It can kind of turn into like, well, maybe somebody hasn't really cared about the franchise in a while, but they see the door open for an opportunity to hate on it, and it's like, dive in, So that kind of stuff I think there's kind of that little bit of like that whipping up a little bit that can happen sometimes.
And I'm self-aware enough to know that like I just don't have to pay attention to it and then it won't bother me, right? But I see outlets like IGN saying this is rock bottom for the MCU. Again, it's all subjective. No. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but for my purposes, to say that this movie is worse than Love and Thunder, what are you smoking? Like in no world is this movie worse than Love and Thunder and a few other ones.
I think one thing that is also causing some misconsternation is the fact that we're comparing it to Captain America movies, which are one of the most beloved, through lines of the entire saga here. And if you compare this, it's a weird thing because it is the first Sam Wilson Captain America movie, but it is the fourth Captain America movie. So it's like this thing of like, he's just getting his start. We're just learning who this character is. They may do really interesting things with the next one. I think Winter Soldier is everyone's, a lot of people's favorite Marvel movie, or like a really beloved Marvel movie.
Sure.
And, it wasn't until the second one that really got there, And I think that it's tough. This is the first time we've really seen someone step into the shoes of someone else, take on the mantle, and those comparisons don't do any favors, to someone trying to get their footing. It's the first outing. We did a big cast on Monday that dropped on Tuesday, and today. Today's been long, but it's I have my problems with the movie,
Sure.
and the more I sit with it, I have some like kind of major problems with the movie, but it is nowhere near the worst Marvel movie or like a bad Marvel movie. It has its issues. I think they made some decisions in the writing of this movie to accommodate kind of changes that happened, and we know they did that, but also like actors, I think they accommodated Harrison Ford a little too much is my take on this movie. And I can go into depth with that when we get to somewhere where we can talk spoilers, but I think that's a little and it makes me sad because I think they had a different plan that was more interesting and more novel, and you can tell by the early release stuff and the later release stuff, like the things they changed and took out of the trailers, that there's just some changes that were made. And I think the movie holds together really well, really seamless. Like I did not get that Falcon Winter Soldier feeling where I was like, oh, there's the thing, there's this thread they dropped. Like that, they did a really good job editing this thing together. But they clearly made some changes, and I think it had more to do with things outside of the universe rather than like artistic decisions. And I think that some of that made the movie not stand out like it could if it had been a little more bold with its creative decisions.
I think to say that this was a character starting out movie is a disservice to Anthony Mackie's portrayal of Sam Wilson. He's done a lot of work to be this character.
Sure.
And he does it really well, in my opinion. So I think he carried the movie well, and it was very serious in tone, which I wasn't expecting. And it was very emotional. Like I said on our source pages review in comparison, like I cried 3 or 4 times watching this movie. So I think it's just different strokes for different folks, but don't write it off just because of XYZ.
Yeah, for sure.
You always have to remember too, whenever we talk numbers and box office and all that type of stuff, like it is just numbers, at the end of the day, but we're also comparing Marvel to Marvel a lot of times. Like Marvel has kind of ascended to be a new thing. And so we've kind of talked about this a little bit here and there, but yeah, it's that idea of, okay, well, this is a low Marvel box office, but then you compare it to another movie and you're like, well, if you compare it to an average sort of, movie that's even a franchise movie, you're like, oh, well, this one looks pretty good compared to that, if we're having a conversation of $200 million in its opening weekend as being low, now is the budget too high on this movie and movies and made by Marvel in general? Probably, but that's something that you can control and you can discuss and you can fix later on. Like that's something that doesn't always have to be the case. But yeah, you always got to remember that in the back of your mind. You're comparing Marvel to Marvel most of the time. It's not. Sometimes we can get bogged down with that of saying, well, this movie, has a low MCU opening, but a low MCU opening a lot of times, if the budget's low, is still a pretty high opening compared to other movies and other franchises.
There are. I just wanted to know there are $54 billion movies. 54 movies have crossed $1 billion. 11 of them have been Marvel movies. It's like, that's just insane. A third of their movies have crossed into like the highest 54 movies of all time. That's just a lot.
It's unprecedented.
Oh, 100%. It's the most successful franchise of all time. And you can't expect them all to make $1 billion. And this is a good number for this movie. And to speak to what you said, Haley, I didn't mean to say it's his first time as a character, but it's his first solo outing. It's his first time standing up on his own as a character in a movie, being the central figure in a movie, which is just a different thing. He's been a sidekick up until now, I think. And that's just what it is. I like this movie. I really do. But it's got its issues, and I'm glad people are enjoying it, though. All right, we want to move on to this next story. Anybody else have anything on Brave New World?
When I see it, I'll let you know.
All right, well, next we have, according to exclusive reports from Deadline, the Mike Flanagan-penned solo Clayface film seems to be on track to meet its targeted September 2026 release date, with DC leadership set to hear pitches from potential filmmakers next week. 2 noteworthy names are rising to the top as candidates to helm the rumored horror tragedy, including Speak No Evil's James Watkins and Truth or Dare's Jeff Wadlow, with the expectation that casting will quickly follow suit once a director is locked in. James Gunn has described the film as a DCU project, but it is still unclear whether it will connect to any existing projects or continuity. Do we have preferences as to which Potter will have their turn at the wheel?
This is starting to feel a little bit like a Jurassic World Rebirth situation. Initially, when I saw, September 2026 as a release for this thing when we first started talking about it, I did not know how feasible that was. Now that we're at this point, still seems, like they might be cutting it kind of close. Depends on how big a film this is. But with the 2 directors at play here, I think there is a strong case to be made for the fact that this might be a smaller budget movie, maybe not as many of those special effects. Maybe those are just reserved for a few transformation sequences, what have you. So going into this, I did not really have much of a preference between James Watkins and Jeff Wadlow. I knew I was familiar with James Watkins' work in Speak No Evil, but I had not seen Truth or Dare. But when I look at Jeff Wadlow's filmography here, I actually think maybe he might be a better candidate. It's not a super impressive filmography here, but there are a couple of standouts for me. Kick-Ass 2, which I think is better than a lot of other people do. He's also got Fantasy Island and last year's Imaginary. So just in terms of being able to do something a little more high concept as compared to James Watkins, who I really don't recognize anything that he's done other than Speak No Evil. So I'm kind of leaning towards Wadlow here. So we were talking a little bit offline, like what kind of movie is this actually going to be? And I don't think it's going to be horror light. Like, I think it's going to be full on horror. The fact that we got Mike Flanagan, who has become such a household name as far as horror goes, and then these two directors are kind of the top choices. I think there's a strong case to be made that this is going to be a straight up horror film, a la like The Substance or something like that, which I'd definitely be looking forward to. Now, in terms of casting, I really have no idea, but I think if you look at these filmmakers, with the exception of James Watkins having worked with James McAvoy on Speak No Evil, like that's kind of the highest profile person in the proceedings here, but he did work with Scoot McNairy on that same movie. So even if it ends up being Jeff Wadlow or James Watkins, like Scoot McNairy kind of emerged as like a potential candidate or somebody like that, somebody that's kind of like a little more squirrely character actor that I could really buy as like having these desires to potentially inject themselves with something that, will have terrible, terrible consequences. But I think Clayface is a super interesting character. We've had a lot of adaptations. I'll dance around spoilers for Creature Commandos, but I will be inherently interested to see if this does connect to Creature Commandos and if we get some confirmation about the fate of the character that we saw in that series.
I'm still just excited for this movie for some reason. I think it's the pathos of Clayface. Like, he's such an interesting character. Scotty, you're right. There's a thread to be pulled there from Creature Commandos. What it will be, we don't know. But it's just interesting. Like, John Jackson Miller released at the end of last year a book called Batman Resurrection, and it takes place between the Michael Keaton Batman movies 1 and 2. And Clayface is a character in it that has a pretty pivotal role. And it's done in such a way that, like, you just really feel for that character. So I think there's a very cool opportunity to do the man behind the monster kind of Jekyll and Hyde type thing that is inherent with Clayface, but make it really, like, empathetic and yet horror at the same time.
Yeah, Flanagan has described it as a tragedy. Like, it's this kind of, like, fall of a man sort of tragic story, like fall of a person type thing. And The Substance seems like the best comparison here, right? I mean, it's this idea of like this like kind of body horror type thing and that sort of genre, and that seems like a good connection. I mean, we see what The Substance is doing. It's getting into the Oscar conversation. It's getting, Demi Moore all the spotlight. Like, clearly there's a connection to be made there between this type of story and that type of story. And so I think, like, as we look forward, I mean, we've talked about it before. James Gunn has been on the record, like, he wants his studio to be creative focused, and he wants to empower creators, and he wants to be like, oh, you want to tell a straight up horror movie? You don't have to fit a certain formula. And those were words back then, but now we really get to see if there's action behind those words as we start to move into the actual DCU and we start to see some of these projects take shape. So this will be a good litmus test, right? To kind of see, does it have to match the DC formula? Is there a DC formula? Or are we going to really let Mike Flanagan be Mike Flanagan and do something really out there and true horror? And I think people will respond well to that. Like, I think that idea of it's not super connected. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to tease a sequel at the end. You don't have to bring Batman into it or whatever. It can just be a story that Mike Flanagan wanted to tell because he wanted to tell it. I think people are going to connect with that a little bit.
Yeah. I could absolutely see this being the next Joker, like the next, obviously Clayface is not as well known a character as Joker is, but I feel like Clayface is a very common Batman villain in almost every iteration. And you think about, like, when I think about the animated series, which is, I think, our generation grew up on, his episodes are very memorable episodes and things. It's just a character a lot of us know, even if he's not the premier villain of a Batman thing. So I really think this could be that next sort of like breakout movie for DC that it doesn't have to be connected to anything. And I love Mike Flanagan. I will always love him from Midnight Mass. And I'm really, really hopeful that this will be as good as that was, because that's the only thing I really know Mike Flanagan has done. And I think it's one of my favorite things I've seen. So I'm hoping that I'm torn about the directors. Like, I like the fact that they're horror directors because it will be a horror movie, which I think is good to really make it a genre piece. But also, as much as Midnight Mass was a horror thing, it was elevated horror, really, really elevated. And so I'm hoping that these directors can take Mike Flanagan's work and make that happen here as well.
Yeah.
And as for who it should be, come on, at least give Alan Tudyk a
Shake.
a chance at that role. Like, let him audition, because I think he has very different modes, and he's already played this character in multiple universes. I would love to see him get in there and do a completely different version, and I think he could be great as a body horror Clayface.
Hey, we know he's in Superman. We don't know
Oh yeah.
how or what or why, but we know that he is in Superman in some form.
True.
And I wonder where Clayface falls on the Madam Web Joker scale. Because,
Yikes. The yikes meter?
we want it to do better than Joker
From
Folia
little
do
yikes to
and
big yikes.
Craven.
Yeah.
We'll see.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like, if you're DC, you're like, how do we make this movie not a Sony movie? I mean,
exactly.
it has to stand apart, and it has to get good reviews out of the gate, or people will simply just not see it.
Yeah.
Because
That's not why those movies failed. Come on, didn't you hear the guy from Sony?
Oh, yeah.
He's like, it's not me, it's you. You can't understand my elevated stuff.
Girls don't like superheroes. We all know that.
Yeah, it's a woman
We've
problem.
seen toy aisles. They're separated for a reason.
They killed the Flash, and they're going to come for Clayface next.
Oh, shoot.
With what you just said, Jay, bringing up the Flash again, it reminded me how one of the worst criticisms of the Flash was how some of the CG looked like claymation almost, and they could kind of lean into that with this movie if they wanted to. Like, hey, let's save on the VFX a little bit. We want it to look mushy.
Mushy?
I think if they want this movie to be really horror, they need to do as much practical as they can with Clayface.
Oh, yeah,
even
for
though
sure.
he's the big morphing creature, you got to get that like visceral in the room feeling for that. The transformations, I think.
I wonder how much they'll lean into that. It could be like we've compared it to The Substance again. Like, we might not see that hulking beast until the very end. Like, I imagine it starts off like, this is kind of a good thing. Like, as an actor, I can change my face, and this is actually working out pretty well for me, but it has consequences.
I won't spoil anything, but in that vein, don't sleep on Batman Resurrection. That book is really, really good, especially if you love the Tim Burton Batman movies.
Okay.
Cool. Speaking on the Madam Web of it all, the Sonyverse thing, DC has so far been successful with its Joker movies being, disconnected, and really just being able to make some disconnected decisions. But we haven't seen what will happen with Superman or whatnot, and the fact that it's technically right now disconnected from Batman. But I think the thing is, if you're gonna make a standalone movie, that character has to have some sort of following. It has to have some sort of love for that character. If you're going to make the decision to make it a separate, like, pull it out. So many of the Spider-Man characters work in a Spider-Man movie, but they don't work by themselves.
Sure.
And they don't, there's not big Madam Web fans out there. There's not throngs of them anyway. And there's not huge Morbius fans, not throngs of them anyway. There's people who like those characters in comics, but it just doesn't have the same constituency, as it were. Weird word for it. I think this has the chance because I think a lot of people grew up with this character in one form or another. No pun intended.
Horror movies are low budget too. I mean, you can do this thing probably for a low budget. It doesn't have to have the big blockbuster superhero movie budget that we're used to seeing with Marvel and DC. It can get a little smaller. Like you said, practical effects look better and they're cheaper than doing all of the CGI and the editing and all of that type of stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, I think if you're the director, that's part of your pitch. I mean, you're saying, like, I can keep this budget pretty low, like a horror movie. And it's got the DC weight behind it, and it has possible connections to DCU, however much or little connections you want to have. And let me fly, and I think from there you can, you can put together a pitch that works for all parties.
All right, now hold me back while I talk to James Gunn. Hold me back. James Gunn, you better not play with the idea that this might be connected if it's not. Just be freaking honest with the viewers that this is like, it's an Elseworlds tale or it's connected. If you do the whole like,
you know,
the
here.
Flash
it
might
matter
be
if it is or isn't. All the way up until opening night, we're going to be speculating on whether or not it is.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the reason for that is James Gunn likes to play those games.
He does. He loves it.
Don't do that. That pisses us off. It is dangling a thing in front of us we want, which is connectivity, and then pulling it away if it's not going to be connected. And I don't make us be thinking about whether this movie's connected the whole time. Let us live in the movie and enjoy its artistic vision, Yeah. The only time that ever worked was in Split. That surprise connected universe was awesome. Anybody? Split?
Oh yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Love that connection at the end.
Too bad
So
they
cool.
shat the bed with glass, but yeah.
I know. I know. All right. Well, moving on. We'll talk about the M. Night Shyamalan superhero verse another time. Christopher Nolan's next film for Universal, The Odyssey, has assembled an understandably stacked cast that includes the likes of Tom Holland, Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, and John Bernthal, to name a few. Now, Mia Goth has joined the cast in an undisclosed role, while Matt Damon's role has finally officially been revealed to the title role of Odysseus, as announced via a photo shared from the film's X account. The retelling of Homer's epic poem is slated for a July 17th, 2026 release. What can we glean, if anything, from these casting announcements and first look? Are we feeling epic yet?
The cast list is certainly epic. I think there's like 15 to 20 people total that they've kind of announced, and a lot of them are A-listers or A-minus listers for sure. It's not like there's anybody to sneeze at in this one, so that's cool. The photo of Matt Damon is fine. It's very generic looking, in my opinion. I think I told J&J Scotty that I thought it was Dominic Monaghan at first, and I was like, okay. And then what's funny is, like, as I was looking at the article and just kind of reading the comments around it, a lot of people with more history knowledge than me are kind of going after the costuming and how inaccurate it is to the source material and stuff like that. And so, I don't know.
That's not Nolan's way.
Well, that's what is kind of surprising. Like, that's the only reason I feel like to care or even point it out. So, I mean, whatever. I don't know. Again, it's just a standalone of Matt Damon. He's been called a generic looking actor too. So, there is that contributing to the photo. I don't know. I just don't know about this film. Like, I think it'll be fine. I still think it's going to be 5 hours long.
We did learn some new information with this announcement, though, too. Like, we didn't know. I mean, we knew Matt Damon was in it, but we didn't know who he was playing. And so now we know that he is playing Odysseus. He is the lead role. And we can start to sort of theorize, I guess, on who other people are playing. I think this probably means Tom Holland might be Odysseus' son, who kind of plays an important role in the movie, probably. And then, Mia Goth getting in the cast. Like, I have to think she's some sort of, like, siren or something from that scene. Or it kind of makes a lot of sense. But overall, I mean, this is Nolan's next big step, right? Like, he kind of, he got the Oscar, and I think it's wonderful on some level that they're like, all right, you got the Oscar, you can do literally anything. What do you want to do? And he's like, I'm going to do the Odyssey. And he's like, I'm going to do it all over the world with the most amazing cast you've ever seen. And yeah, it's probably going to be really long, but you've got to I'm thinking ahead to the IMAX. The IMAX is going to be crazy for this movie. It's still 2 weeks away from Spider-Man, so there's that. I still think Spider-Man will probably move. I don't think Nolan's moving, just on principle and because he put out a photo and he's like, this is whenever this is happening. So I don't think Nolan's moving, but that'll be something to watch going forward. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about this movie. It's grown. It's kind of the next step. You're going to the historical epic, the like Roman / Greek / ancient world type epic that has happened. And really, we've missed for a while. Like, Hollywood was big on those for a long time back in the day. Like, a lot of that was kind of like the next big thing for directors, was to kind of do like the Gladiator or the Braveheart or the Troy or the whatever. And this is like Nolan's version of that, I think, in some way. So, I mean, we're only getting started talking about this movie. It'll keep growing as it films and as we learn more about it. But yeah, I think it's really exciting. I mean, I think this is a really unique project and cool, and I think it's a story that we assume everybody's familiar with, but like, I mean, a lot of people aren't, and it's a story that's been around since the 8th century BC. I mean, there's a reason it's stuck around for this long, and I think and I just implicitly at the end of the day, I just trust Christopher Nolan more than any other director. So I just kind of feel like I gotta hear him out on whatever project he wants to do.
I don't think he's moving either, because he's hoping that we'll get a Spidey-acy or whatever he's going to combine. Name these two can
That
have.
wasn't his doing. That was Margot Robbie's.
I think he hated that so much. Like, it helped this movie, but I think he hated it so much.
I'm just saying, after the success of his last one, like, the idea of going up against a big budget movie probably doesn't scare him anymore. He's like, I'm not worried about it. It worked really well for me last time.
The fact that Tom Holland and Zendaya are in both of them too is kind of funny.
Yeah, that's true. That's really wild. Oh man, yeah. I'm excited for this. I think it looks cool, and like you said, Jay, trust Nolan implicitly. Like, he's been making good movies for a really long time and doesn't really have a lot of misses at all. So, Dark Knight Rising accepted. Yeah. But yeah, great director. Let him cook.
Yeah. I went into this a little dubious. I didn't know how much we would actually have to say about this, because all it really is a photo of a guy in a costume. Like, that's all there is.
It's the back of him too. It's
like, it literally could be anybody.
It's just a cape.
Yeah, but we had talked about the possibility. I think more and more as we learned more about this film, it became apparent that it was a faithful adaptation set in the original time period. But at one point in time, we were saying, like, is this going to be a modern adaptation, or what's going to be Nolan's in? Like, what's he going to do? So that was one thing I took away from this photo, is like, clearly I was interested to hear about the historical inaccuracies there, Haley, because I was not aware of that. I thought it looked pretty faithful based on what I know.
Is that true or not? I don't know. I just saw it, so who knows?
Yeah. But to get the confirmation that Damon is Odysseus, I think a lot of us were suspecting that. But to your point there, Jay, I think with that casting, you can start to put the pieces together. I think you're right on the money with Tom Holland. I think I can start to kind of guess where John Bernthal's going to fall into this thing too, given his track record and the types of characters that he likes to play. But Mia Goth especially, I think you're nailing it, because you described her. I'm going to assume you're describing her as A- talent there, Haley, when you mentioned some of these are more A-. And she's definitely
I feel like that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
She's more like X talent.
No, there you go. Yeah. But she's definitely an up-and-comer, but I think she works in a certain capacity. So yeah, I think like a siren, or like maybe like a lotus eater, maybe something that he sees in some kind of like trance-like state. Because I just think back on her, the roles that I've seen her in, and one that really comes to mind is there was a movie called Infinity Pool with her and Alexander Skarsgård, and she kind of played a role just like that. She was like a temptress that was like, her whole purpose was to kind of keep him there and keep him entrapped. So I have to imagine Nolan, when he goes about doing this casting, like while he does want to like carve out his own niche and give people a platform to create new characters and archetypes and stuff like that, I think he's the kind of filmmaker that looks like, oh, you worked in this capacity and it worked really well. Let me assemble these pieces to make the most epic thing that I can. So apart from that, the fact that we're getting a first look like this early on, I think we can look at Oppenheimer again for like what the marketing is going to look like for this thing. Like, I think you can probably look at Thunderbolts, with that being being the big first summer like tentpole release. He's probably going to attach a trailer to that. If not that, definitely one of these July releases, either Jurassic World Rebirth or Fantastic Four First Steps.
I will end by saying I don't hate Matt Damon. I didn't mean any of that by what I said. I just want to make that clear. I don't have any animosity towards him, but I do think it's kind of cool that like he did Oppenheimer because Christopher Nolan called him, and he was going to take a hiatus from acting, and he told his wife like, I'm not doing anything unless Christopher Nolan calls, and then he did, and he gave him that kind of small-ish role in Oppenheimer, and I just have this feeling that he was like, I got something for you, if you hang with me, kind of like he did with Cillian Murphy. Cillian played a lot of smaller roles in his films, and then he gets Best Actor for Oppenheimer. So I do think that's a nice trajectory he does with his actors.
Benny Safdie, you're next.
All right, well, coming up after the break, we have so much fun stuff. We got Rings of Power Season 3 discussion, John Lithgow might be Dumbledore, and the Goonies get the Legacy sequel treatment. Stay tuned after this.
Oh, I will.
Welcome back to Multiverse News! We have a Patreon, guys. You should go join it, right? Who wants to tell them about the Patreon this week?
You should, because you get a cool sticker. Look at this cool sticker on the video if you're watching the video. Our current patrons, I've heard from about half of you. Awesome. I need the rest of you to send me your address so I can mail you your sticker. But then if you join the Patreon at patreon.com/multiversenewscast, it's $4 a month. You get a sticker too. So hang out with us over there. We've got Matt ranting about TV shows, extra episodes. We've got polls. We've got giveaways. And we have merch. Tell them about the merch, Jay.
Oh, yeah. We have merch. If you've ever wanted the Multiverse News logo on a hoodie or a coffee cup or a T-shirt, you can get all of those things at our merch shop, which you can find it through our sites. I mean, it's on our Instagram. It's on our Patreon. If you just type it in the browser, it's just multiverse-news-shop.fourthwall.com.
I'll make sure the link is on our page on strandedpanda.com too.
That's probably an easier thing to do. Yeah. So,
yeah.
So I mean, check it out. And we went with Fourth Wall because it's a good company. They provide customer service. They make good products, and they ship it directly to you if you buy it. So check that out and get some Multiverse News merch while it's hot.
Yeah.
And patrons get 10% off.
Yes, patrons get a special code that gets 10% off. So you join Patreon today, you get a sticker sent to you, and you get 10% off of anything that you buy at any time from the merch store. I mean, it's paying for itself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For this quality content, come on.
Come on.
What are you doing?
All right. Well, we also have a Spotify poll this week. We asked, would you go see a Magic the Gathering movie? I was curious how many Magic the Gathering heads we have in the audience. We have 36% of you said yes, and 64% of you said no. Does that line up with us here? How many of you would go see a Magic the Gathering movie?
No.
Should have been a third option. Depends. Because if the marketing's strong, I'd definitely go see it. But I've never played Magic the Gathering. I've always observed it from a distance.
Yeah.
Like a panda.
I like when the polls are very definitive, kind of force people to make a decision.
Yeah.
Like in this moment, would you go see it?
No.
And see how people are. Yeah, no, all right. Yeah, don't lie, Jay Scotty. You go see everything.
Yeah,
I've started to be a little more selective. I've had the A-list for a few years now. I don't feel quite the impetus to see everything anymore.
All right, well, up next we have the lightning round. This is where I'm going to read a story. It's going to be short, quick, to the point, and then one of us will shout out our name to claim that story because we would like to be the one to respond to it. And then once per lightning round, we get a rebuttal. So here we go. Universal has debuted the first full trailer for the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon ahead of its June 13th release.
Scotty, I thought this was an improvement on the teaser trailer we saw because we got to see a few more dragons. I still think Toothless looks a little bit too much like his animated counterpart. It looks like they've just added a few more scales and things to make him look more detailed. But we got to see some other dragons, and that's where I got a little more excited. I was like, okay, these dragons look different. They look menacing. They look like actual dragons. But the unfortunate thing is after you see all these great dragons, it cuts to a shot of just Vikings, Viking adolescence, and then it looked like a TV movie at that point. So there's still a few months. Maybe they can polish some things up, but I guess if you're going to invest the money in the VFX, it's important that the dragons look pretty cool. So,
indeed.
Scotty, you're a little blurry. Are you able to do the hand thing?
Yeah, just all of a
sudden. I don't know if...
Yeah, I just noticed it too. Must have been recent. There you go. Follow it back. There you did it.
You're such a pro at that now.
Yeah. Good job. He did the camera tracked his thumb beautifully.
That's a beautiful thumb.
Never seen a thumb like it. That's getting weird. All right.
A little bit.
Not adding to this.
I will not participate, Haley says.
No.
All right. Hulu released a first look teaser for the final season of The Handmaid's Tale, premiering with 3 episodes on April 8th, followed by weekly releases until May 27th finale. The May 27th finale. Meanwhile, the sequel series, The Testaments, has cast Chase Infinity to star alongside returning Handmaid's Tale veteran Ann Dowd. Matt, I've actually been rewatching Handmaid's Tale, and I just love this show. And the thing about this show is it wants you to live in the sort of misery that is this place, and like it's all about where does hope come from and all this stuff. It's like it's such a good show, but you always want it's the action movie-fication of in my mind. Like I always just want them like to. This is where someone's going to stand up and fight, right? Like this is where finally someone's going to, and there are moments like that, but for the most part, the show, because they don't have a choice and it's about the like tragedy that is this world. And so you don't get the fighting back. Like I always want to see, just slap her, just slap him, like whoever's oppressing you, just go at him. And that's not what the show's about. But this season kind of looks like they're kind of getting their rebellion together even stronger, and it's going to be a little bit about that. And I gotta say, after 6 years or whatever of watching this show and feeling this like desire to see them be able to rebel, seeing this trailer made me really excited. Like, yes, finally, please rebel, please, I need it. Okay. 6-time Emmy winner John Lithgow is in final negotiation to portray Professor Albus Dumbledore in HBO's high-profile series adaptation of the Harry Potter books, sources tell Deadline.
Haley, you know what? I would never have picked John Lithgow in 100 years, which is why I'm not in casting and other people are. But when I saw this, I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a faithful Dumbledore from the books adaptation, I think Lithgow can do that serious but playful personality that Dumbledore has really well. And so if this is what ends up being true, I think it's a great call.
Scotty with a rebuttal. I think this potential casting, in addition to what we were talking about with the gentleman that was up for the role of Snape not that long ago, I think it's just very clear that they're going to go in a very different direction than what we saw in the films, which I think is a good move. And the films kind of had the reputation. I think they might have come out and said like this is going to be a strictly UK adaptation. All of the actors, everybody involved is going to be from the UK. So now John Lithgow, I've learned that he is actually considered by many an honorary Brit because he trained classically in London in his early days there. But the fact that they are willing to do casting like this, and like you said, Haley, John Lithgow elevates everything that he's in, so it behooves them.
Ridley Scott's dystopian thriller The Dog Stars is adding to its cast with Margaret Qualley, Josh Brolin, and Guy Pearce in final talks to join Jacob Elordi. Written by Mark L. Smith, the film adapts Peter Heller's 2012 apocalyptic novel for 20th Century Studios.
Jay, it's just run-of-the-mill casting news, but at the same time, these are pretty big names here that we're talking about. Margaret Qualley's coming off The Substance, so she is a rising star in Hollywood. Obviously, Josh Brolin is Josh Brolin and Guy Pearce is Guy Pearce. And then Jacob Elordi, coming off of all of his success, is, again, one of those rising stars in Hollywood. So that's a pretty stacked cast for a movie out the gate.
Prime Video has confirmed The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power for a 3rd season. Set to film this spring, the new season will feature a major time jump unfolding during the height of the War of the Elves and Sauron as the Dark Lord forges the One Ring.
Jay, this time jump, if I'm reading it right, will put us at the same sort of time that the Fellowship of the Ring starts in that opening scene. Not when it starts with Frodo and Bilbo, but like in that opening scene where they're fighting the war against Sauron and they cut the ring off the finger and all that type of stuff. If I'm reading this right, this is jumping to that point, and that is what the season 3 will be about, which I think is really interesting because we've had this conversation of will they, won't they when it comes to the Rings of Power, and does it connect to the wider Tolkien universe that was established in the trilogy, or is it its own thing? And it seems like it's kind of not really had to confirm one way or the other because it was such a far-reaching back prequel. But then we started to see things like Isildur and like, like some of these characters, Galadriel and all this type of stuff. And so, yeah, now we're starting to kind of push the boundaries of the trilogy a little bit. And it does kind of make you wonder, what is the end game for the Rings of Power? Like, is this a movie is this a series rather, that is going to continue into a season 4 that will continue that story? Or are we reaching that point where they don't really want to move into trilogy territory, Tolkien territory of the trilogy, the Fellowship of the Ring and all of that? So, and again, that scene, it is a prequel scene, like that. They're going way back. They're like, this happened a long time ago, so it's not like it's bumping right up against that movie, but still, I think there's an interesting kind of like cross section that we got going on here with that storyline with season 3.
Well, and isn't there a rights issue with some of the material?
There is. Yeah.
Like Amazon has some of it, but New Century or whatever that production house.
I thought one had it for the
Line,
TV shows and one had it for the movies or something like that.
I think that's right. We like kind of like deep dove into it. It was like months and months ago, I think, like before Rings of Power season 2 came out. And yeah, we walked away. I remember walking away just being like, wait, so they can do this, but they can't do that, and just like being very confused by it. So yeah, it is a weird rights issue.
Mm. Well, and the thing is, this is saying that this season is going to be this war. So it's going to be maybe the same war as you see at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, but this is about the forging of the One Ring. That is about him being defeated with the One Ring. So I'm guessing there'll still be story to tell between this and that. I doubt they'll make it that far in one season. If last season is any indication, forging can really take a whole season.
There's a lot of time there too. I mean, the ring, it goes to Isildur for a while, and then it goes into the river.
You did it a couple times. I got it.
It goes into the. Isildur. I tried to read the Silmarillion or whatever a couple times and gave up. So, then it falls in the river for a while, and then Gollum gets it for a while. So I mean, there's time. You can play in that time for a while if you wanted to.
Mm. Yeah. I've just been over here, like, quietly reciting Cate Blanchett's opening monologue in my head. It began with the forging of the great rings.
Cast it into the fire is what's been playing in my head.
Peacock has released the first teaser trailer for season 2 of Twisted Metal, starring Anthony Mackie. The series will return this summer.
Haley, none of us watched it. I didn't watch it, but I feel like I remember hearing that people really liked it as an adaptation. So good.
Yeah. I think people who liked the game seemed to like it, is what I sort of heard. So that's always a good thing.
I heard it really elevated what was in the game too, because I didn't know how they were going to make a story out of this, and I haven't seen season 1 yet. But the fact that they're making a season 2 and it's coming soon makes me want to see season 1, because I like Anthony Mackie a lot. So I don't know why I haven't seen it yet, because I did hear it was just a really good show. Like, and I just, based on the source material, I did not think it would make a good show. Like, you're just shooting rockets from your cars. What's that going to be? Felt like Battleship, but apparently they put in the work. Deadline sources say Netflix is... Netflix? Really? Oh, Lord.
You just get one. All right, you just get one.
Yep, that's right. That would be really interesting, actually. Like a streaming service that every night was just single movie. Because then it'd be like Wordle. Everyone's like, did you do the Netflix tonight? I don't know.
That's how TV used to be.
That's true.
We've come full circle.
We're always going to.
Exactly. There's something to that, though. The water cooler thing. Okay. Deadline's sources say that Netflix is developing a live-action Dungeons & Dragons series titled The Forgotten Realms. Sean Levy, Hasbro Entertainment, and showrunner Dave Crivello are producing the project.
Scotty, I think this makes a lot of sense. When I first read it, I was like, how has this not happened sooner? It just makes a lot of sense to do a live-action Dungeons & Dragons series. But then I contemplated, well, you'd have to have a budget to do that kind of thing without it being like super cheesy and probably irritating the fan base. But then you look at Sean Levy, you look at Hasbro. I'm not super familiar with Dave Crivello, but I think there's enough investment there that they're probably going to give it its due and give it enough money for it to at least have a chance in its first season. So I've always liked Dungeons and Dragons, never been a super invested in the world kind of person. But yeah, I think coming off of the movie from a couple of years ago, people want to see more Dungeons and Dragons, and I'll check it out.
Warner Brothers has hired Patsy Panciaroli to write a sequel to the 1985 film The Goonies, with Steven Spielberg and Chris Columbus returning as producers. The project has no director attached yet.
Hey, you guys.
That's going to be the like stand up and clap moment in the theater. All right. Deadline has it. I don't know. Nobody said anything else. That's good.
I feel like we just talked about this not that long ago.
The thing that makes this most interesting to me is the kind of like emergence of Ke Kwan as, you know, an Oscar winner, and then he had his own like starring role in Love Hurts, which I have not seen yet, but it's in theaters now. And then I think it's in theaters now, right?
It is.
Yeah, it is. Okay. And then now they're doing a Return of the Goonies. I'm assuming he will be in that. Right. And so just kind of cool to see him get his like second round of fame here. It's neat. Deadline has learned that Denis Villeneuve is currently planning to film Dune 3 this summer, and as a team has been in pre-production on the film for quite some time. The trade also confirmed that the third film will adapt Frank Herbert's sequel novel, Dune Messiah, and will complete Paul Atreides' story.
Haley, I don't think we need to go past Dune Part 3, Denis. And we knew he was writing it. We've known that for a while, so I'm glad that they're, making it public that actually production is truly beginning, and I'm excited for it.
Sweet. Peaky Blinders creator Stephen Knight revealed on BBC Breakfast that the Netflix film has wrapped filming and will serve as a send-off, though the story may not be over yet, with the showrunner teasing, "I'm not allowed to announce it, but I'm just saying the world of Peaky will continue." Matt, I have, since we last talked about this, finally gone back and watched the entire series, and it's great, and I'm really pumped for the movie. The show is so good. I just did not expect the quality, and it's prestige television all the way. I don't know why. I thought it looked kind of cheesy when I'd seen it in the past, but it's really, really good, and Cillian Murphy just Killians it. He's amazing. And it really is a character study. So as for Peaky continuing, I don't know where you like the world of Peaky Blinders is great, but like it's about him. The entire show is about him. It's from his perspective. Everything is kind of like hinged on the fact that he is who he is, and continuing that world without him seems maybe a bad decision, but if you've got an idea, go for it. But I really love him as a character, and the acting is just superb, and so excited to see how his story wraps up. In an interview with GQ, Fantastic Four First Steps actor John Malkovich revealed that he previously turned down several Marvel roles due to insufficient pay.
Scotty, what I found interesting about this one is the fact that he refers to roles, plural there, because if you look at his comments, he talks about, like, if you're going to put me on a crane and put me in front of a green screen for the better part of 6 months, you got to pay up, and they weren't willing to do that. So with those comments, I think it's pretty obvious that he's probably referring to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 4, where I know they wanted him to be Vulture in that. But then I also have to suspect that before they got Michael Keaton to do it for Homecoming, they probably spoke to him about it then, I would have to imagine. Yeah, and I mean, he'd be a great Vulture. But I really do wonder what some of these other potential roles might have been, because he's just one of those guys. Like, you could insert him really anywhere in terms of like the villainous roles, or he could even like function in that. He could just be like an a-hole boss that somebody like Jane Foster has to deal with, or something like that. So.
Yeah. Or he could play. Let's see. What's your best guess? What's another good Malkovich role? Everybody, this is a good way to end the show.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Kamala Khan. There we go.
Like, what could he have played in the past?
Yeah, past MCU characters. Who would you have put him on, other than clearly Kamala Khan, which is the best answer?
I could have seen them approaching him for that Bill Murray role in Quantumania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, totally see that.
Yeah,
totally.
Definitely.
Maybe it'll be another not Celestial. Those brothers, the Bill Murray character, and then the Collector in comics are brothers, right?
Oh, you're thinking of the Grandmaster and the Collector are brothers in comics.
I think the Bill Murray character is supposed to be too, right? Am I wrong on
maybe.
That? Anybody? Haley, maybe?
I can't remember.
Okay, I'm pretty sure, but I might be wrong. I could be wrong. I think that he was supposed to be the third brother.
Grandmaster is another one.
Grandmaster's a good one. I was thinking like anything from
Yeah.
Guardians. Like there's got to be a role there in Guardians because he's the comedic side that John Malkovich brings would really, I think, work in that particular corner of the MCU pretty well. Like even the Collector would be that'd be a fun John Malkovich role.
Sure.
Yeah.
I find myself even going like farther back though. Like I like Mickey Rourke, like Ivan Vanko. Like totally, he does a good Russian accent. They totally could have wanted him for that, and like they just weren't willing to pay up at that point in time.
Oh, I could totally see him in that role. Yeah. It's a good one.
I want my bird.
Yeah, he'd be wanting that bird like nobody else.
Give me my bird. I've asked for my bird how many times?
It's pretty good, Sam Rockwell.
Put in the YouTube comments who you guys think they should have had John Malkovich play in the MCU. I just wanted this to be like a list of every character.
Yes.
What's that check look like for Fantastic Four? I mean, he must have finally got his money, right?
Yeah.
Like that paper.
Indeed.
They didn't get Margot Robbie and Adam Driver, and then they're like, we got a little bit extra fat on the bone. Pay up. Let's get John Malkovich in here.
I wonder if he's not playing a role that requires him to be on green screen and on a wire, so he's a little more willing. Like, okay, I'll come play a guy in some robes, which is what it looks like in the trailer.
Yeah, right.
All right, guys. Well, that's the show. Let's go around and tell people where they can find us online. What else we got going on? J. Scotty St. Clair.
Always watching Bingers Assemble and Animation Deliberation. Check them all out.
Whew. Busy man. Haley Hobbs.
Source pages, where, like I said before, Brian and I dropped our review and comparison of Brave New World and how great of a character piece it is for Sam.
Yeah. And Jay Sisson.
Yeah, Commute the Podcast on Mondays, and also Always Watching, covering Severance.
Yeah. And, I'm on all over the place. But the biggest things we got going on is MCU Cast is big. The big year is starting finally in earnest with Brave New World. If you want to hear our more controversial take on it that we had this Monday, go listen to that and let us know how we're wrong, which I'm sure we're going to get a lot of this week. I said the email, and I was like, I know a lot of people are going to be mad at us for having some downer thoughts about this, but there's the email. So tell us why we're wrong. Puts me in a terrible position. I hate when I have to like defend negative thoughts. You know what I mean? Like, I'm definitely willing to listen to other opinions, but I also like it's hard. It's really hard for me to just be like, yes, that is a good point when I don't agree. You know. No, I have to actively try not to argue with everybody when I just disagree with things. But anyway, so if you want to hear me attempt not to argue with everyone, check out MCU Cast this week, and we got Spider-Man wrapping up tomorrow. Spider-Man.
You're
from the neighborhood, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yep, wrapping up tomorrow. So we'll probably do that over there and all that stuff. So always watching for Severance coverage, Bingers Assemble for Oscars coverage, and right here on Multiverse News for all the coverage. And we'll be back. Peace.
You stay classy, Multiverse.
Hey, thanks for listening to Multiverse News, or watching it, or whatever you're doing, eyeballs or ear holes, whichever thing. We do this show every week, and we appreciate you listening. strandedpanda.com is where you can find all of our podcasts, and thank you for listening. Check us out wherever you get podcasts. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the little bell icon, whatever you have on whatever service you're doing. Rate us, like us. We're really thirsty. That's what I'm saying.